Like, it feels like there's light puncturing my eyes, even though it's almost like nothing's there.
I'm Austin.
And I'm Cloud.
This is We Watch Movies.
In the beginning, before there were universes, there were comic book movies. These are their stories. This is We Watch Movies, and this is the first episode in a sub-series we're going to be doing called Before There Were Universes. We take a look at comic book-based movies, not all of which will be superhero-themed, although many of them will be. Before everything was a connected universe. You know, this first one is going to be Superman, the original 1978 Superman, sometimes called Superman the movie, although that's entirely informal and was never its official title in any context. This, yeah, and okay, before somebody goes and tries to bust us, although you still feel free to bust us on whatever you want, because we'll get something wrong or leave something out in this, because there's a ton of, this episode could be 7 hours long talking about, everything that went into getting this movie to be what it was and what all the impact and everything it has, and we'll touch on a bit of that here and there, but it won't be that's there, like there's books written on this movie, so go and read the books, and we'll give you some of it here, but not all of it. So there, before you bust us on, but it's kind of part of a universe, because yes, I understand that they made the Supergirl movie, which is technically canon with the these Superman movies, even though there's only like one character, I think, played by the same actor that crosses over. So yes, technically there's a shared universe, but only sort of, and it's also probably almost nobody has ever even seen the Supergirl movie. We should do it at some point, because I've never seen it either. And it is I think it's supposed to not be very good, but neither are most of the rest of these Superman movies after this one. So, or many of the comic book movies before there were universes. So I'm not sure what the definition of this is going to be. Mostly it's going to be things that are not part of a shared universe, which mostly are just, kind of everything is a shared universe now, or wants to be. They're doing that with the Universal monsters, and the DC thought they were going to do it. It's kind of fallen apart. Marvel's obviously the sort of standard version of it that's done the best job of it. But there are movies that are not part of universes that are based on comic books that came out after there were universes. Things like the Kingsman movies came out after Marvel was already doing its thing, but are not connected to anything else, although they did share they kind of share a universe with Archer. There's an animated short where Archer meets the Kingsman dudes, but so I guess it's not necessarily just before, but it'll largely be before, because most of them are, even things like, although even there are cheating things like Daredevil and Elektra are in the same cinematic universe technically, but there are only those two movies. So it's kind of it's a soft definition of what we mean by before there were universes, but generally that's what it'll be.
I like to think of it as movies that were made without a universe being intended.
Yeah.
Because that was my first thought, was like how Daredevil is like, no one's really connected to Daredevil other than like Elektra's in it, but it's not even the same
They didn't
woman.
know they were making Elektra. Yeah, it's
not even the same person. It's just like, oh, well, it's Elektra, and she just happened to be a character that was over here too.
Yeah.
You know, it's that kind of thing. So, but
there's so much cheating will proceed. I mean, actually, we hadn't invented this series yet, but we've already done a little of this because Cowboys and Aliens is based on a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of counts as part of this retroactively, but we didn't know we were doing this at the time. But so Superman, we're starting with Superman because there had been comic book things in theatrical release before. You'd had the Batman and Superman serials in theaters, the short serials, as far back as like the 30s, but they weren't full on movies, and they were made cheap. They played before the movies. It was mostly just something to get the kids to want to come back every weekend to see the next episode. And there's important things that they did to sort of establish the cliffhanger in at least visual form, although I guess it had already been going on radio shows in around the same time, I guess, for a little while. Things like The Shadow and actually even there were, I think, Batman radio serials, maybe Superman ones, I don't remember for sure. And you had in about 10 years before this, you had the Adam West Batman movie that wasn't really a movie. Like it came out as a movie, it was released theatrically, but it was really just an extra long episode of the TV show. And so that sort of counts, but not really. Like this is the first like big comic book movie. It has real actors in it. It was big and expensive. It was $55 million. It was the most expensive movie ever made at that time. It would the next year be superseded by Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which was then the most expensive movie ever made, even though that's kind of a cheat because all of the stuff with the TV, the failed Phase 2 TV show and everything that were kind of built into the cost for accounting purposes that didn't actually go into the movie. But it was big and expensive, and it's supposedly written by Mario Puzo, who wrote the Godfather books. It's not really. Like his story was like 500 pages long, split across the two. Because they made Superman, or started making Superman 1 and Superman 2 concurrently. There's a whole bunch of production drama that sort of they got about 75% through with that, and then put the rest of 2 on hold until the first one was finished, and then they kicked Richard Donner off because he was arguing with the producers and brought in Richard Lester, and then the whole thing became kind of a mess. And so Superman 2 is kind of a mess of a movie. We'll probably get to it and the other 2 one day in a franchise collection episode. But
oh boy.
oh boy. But there's
drinking will be involved.
So yeah, well, I mean, if we ever do like we'll at least do the first, maybe the second X-Men movies as one of these, like with individual ones. But if we ever get to the third one, much drinking will be involved in that as well in order to make it through it. But
hey Austin, do you remember when that happened?
But it's Gene Hackman, it's Marlon Brando, it's Ned Beatty. There's all kinds of people. Terrence Stamp. But the other thing that's interesting about this is that it was that big 2-part thing, and so you have things in this movie that don't pay off.
No.
Because like Zod and his crew are trapped in the Phantom Zone. They don't come back.
Nope. By
the end of the movie. We just never see them. It's like, why did we spend all this time on convicting General Zod? Like, why is this here? The Krypton explodes. And so it's not... they do the same thing in Man of Steel. They do sort of the same opening on Krypton before it explodes. You have the General Zod thing being, or he disagrees with everybody else who wants to take over. And then, but by the end of that movie, he shows up and attacks the Earth. That doesn't happen in this because that's supposed to happen in the second one, which it does. But they were making one long story spread across 2 movies. and it didn't turn out exactly the way it was meant to because of what happened with Donner leaving. But it's a weird thing that it's like it's a movie, even though it's before the Reuniverses, it's actually a movie made knowing there's a sequel coming this early. You know, this is a year after Star Wars, which in Star Wars is often credited with the like sequelitis kind of syndrome, or the big waiting for big sequels to happen, and you know, Empire doesn't end because Jedi is coming after. But that wasn't a common thing. You had series of things. By this point, we'd already had, I think, 3 Dirty Harry movies or something. Maybe Dirty Harry, maybe or The Enforcer wasn't until 79, but still around this time, you'd had sequels to things, but never really anything that was designed this way. We're making 2 movies at one time. And you know, there's other famous examples of it happening later, the Lord of the Rings movies, and actually Avengers Infinity War is like that as well. They made both parts as one production. And there are other examples too, but it's just it was a big deal for this to happen at all. Oh yeah, the Mario Puzo thing. Supposedly, according to the people who wrote the later drafts of it, that none of his action, like I think they say not a single word of Mario Puzo's script was actually used in the final one. It's entirely rewritten, but that's why you get 4 people credited as the screenplay, and then just a story by Mario Puzo. So, I mean, there's lots of things you couldn't do without, I guess, all the origin stuff. You would kind of have that way because that's just the Superman story that predates the movie. But, and just, I mean, this is the beginning, really. So that's why it is the beginning. And actually, let's talk about the beginning.
It is really pretty,
because
and I dig all of like the glass/crystal effects, and they're not even effects. That's a set.
Well, no, not even that. I want to go further back than that. Like, we'll get to that because that's some really great set design too. But we have to talk. Like, this probably, like, is this still the greatest opening title sequence ever in movies? Like, if it's not, it's right. It's like tied with whatever else is. Like, it's amazing.
It is.
I mean,
especially with like the year and how these effects are. Like,
yeah, it's so like now it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't mean anything. You can do this in After Effects in half an hour. You know, this took the actual final version. That's what's in there. Took like 14 straight hours of shooting the opticals on, like with the animation stands and doing. It's sort of like, it's almost the backlight compositing that they would use in Tron, the original Tron. Later, it's a version of that. So you're using 2 Codolith layers with a gel in between to make the blue, and you're doing long exposures on the animation stand in order to get the trails. But like, it's such an impressive effect.
Yes,
and it's so long a sequence, and like if you watch the later Superman movies, they try to do it again, but they don't spend the time and money on it, and so like the trails are really short. Or they do like the first like 5 things, they do the big long trails, and it looks big and expensive, and then it gets shorter and shorter, and then it gets really late. Even by the second one, I think they did it a lot more lazily. Just because it's such a thing to do, and having the big John Williams music, and which this also maybe, I mean, there's so much great music to credit John Williams for, but I still don't think nobody has done a superhero theme like this. I don't think since, like, the Danny Elfman Batman theme is really great. The Spider-Man theme is great and memorable, but like nothing is like the Superman theme. And it's just like, you think, like, how is this? This has to have been here since the invention of Superman. Like, this is just what Superman sounds like. And of course, that's not what it is at all. There's like 50 years of Superman before this movie.
Well,
but
I think the reason why this music stands out so much is it is a overflow of positivity behind a superhero. Mm-hmm. Like, there is iconic music, but when you have the iconic music matching to the said character, some of it is kind of like dark. You know, like this is something you would play during an action scene because bad things are happening and you hope your hero wins.
Mm-hmm. Well,
like,
and it's used that way.
But it's like Superman is like, I've already won and saved the day. This music is playing to show this.
Yeah, it's actually heroic superhero music.
Exactly.
And it sounds that way.
And while the rest of the music can be good, it doesn't have that kind of feeling to it where, you know, it's the positiveness.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also it's actually, you know, it's a theme, and it's actually also thematic as music, and it's used as a real theme because it's weaved in with the rest of the music for the rest of the movie. You have versions of it on different instruments played at different speeds. You know, even there's a little bit of it in the love theme even, and it's just all over the place. And you can use it the way you're supposed to in actual theme, and a lot of times you don't. I think like the closest anybody has gotten to that anytime recently is the original Avengers theme, the Alan Silvestri Avengers theme is like that. It's immediately identifiable. It doesn't sound like anything else. It captures the mood of what you want it to be. You know, everybody's coming together. You're gonna fight the bad guys. And I think the optimism and the hopefulness is really important just in general for this movie, because they just really committed to the, like, Superman actually just full out says, like, yeah, I fight for truth, justice, and the American way, and he just stands there doing the pose.
Like,
and
God damn it, he's right.
They don't shy away from it at all. They're just like, Superman is a hero, you know, he's good. He doesn't really have a personality. He's just like, he's a blank hero, and he has the costume, and he has the pose, and he flies around saving stuff, and the big heroic music plays, and he just like salutes people as he flies off after he saves them. And they get all of the cliches in. You know, he races the locomotive. He
what a race
he catches a bullet. He saves a cat from a tree. Like they just do all of the stuff that everybody seems like they're scared to do now. Like they just can't just say, well, this is what Superman is. Like, yes, it's kind of hokey, I guess, just because it's old fashioned, or just have just the plain old fashioned hero. That's one of the reasons I like Superman Returns, is because it basically is, it's a real sequel to this movie in a way none of the others that were actual sequels of it were. It does share the universe. It is concurrent and canon with these movies. It ignores 3 and 4, which is a perfectly fine thing to do. But it also, like, it's hopeful, and, you know, and it's like, you know, it has like a gee whiz kind of quality to it, but it isn't. It's not really
golly.
It is. It's like, well, golly.
Did you just say golly?
Golly.
My God.
What did you say? Oh, swell. That's what it is. It's swell. Yeah. Nobody says swell. Which actually, I think even at this time, because remember, this is the late 70s. I think I'm pretty sure I've proposed or put forward my the happiness of Star Wars as an important element of its success on the show before. Which that had done it the year before, but this is still in the late 70s. Towering Inferno, Poseidon Adventure, Earthquake,
disaster
the Dirty
films.
Harry movies, the Death Wish movies, Taxi Driver. You know, everything is just like, it sucks. It's dark. Things are heavy. You know, we still haven't recovered from the depression of Vietnam yet. Like, just everything. Everybody has problems, and everything sucks, and there's crime everywhere, and nobody's
even your
really,
grandmother's committing crimes.
Nobody's really heroes, and you know, we're sort of between heights of communism, Soviet Union paranoia, because you sort of have that in the late 60s. It sort of goes away in the 70s because we have other things to worry about, and then it comes back in the 80s just before the fall. But so we don't have that really to worry about. And I guess you have a little bit of happiness here and there, like, because Roger Moore is James Bond at this time, and so it's a little bit goofball, but there was nothing as happy and hopeful as, like, the good guys and the bad guys, and they're gonna fight, and the good guys are gonna win, and there's gonna be big happy music, and it's just gonna be like, there's no uncertainty as to that good is good. And then this rides on. It was made at the same time, so they didn't know that. Actually, George Lucas was one of the potential directors for it, but he was in the middle of making Star Wars, and so he didn't do it. But it's in the same kind of. It's wanting to do the same kind of thing. It's like, he's just a hero. You know, Lex Luthor is bad. Luthor, as almost everybody in the movie actually says. Nobody ever says Luthor. It's Luthor. But it's just Superman is a hero and it's happy and the music is happy and he goes around saving stuff, and you get a little bit of sadness here and there. Pa Kent has to die, but they do it in at least a reasonable way. Like, he just dies. He dies of a heart attack. There's nothing anybody can do. Superman can still feel guilty that he couldn't do anything. He says, all these powers, I couldn't save him, which actually works in this
reasonable.
movie because it's true.
Yeah.
He couldn't save him. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't stop a heart attack. Now, I guess he could have reversed the Earth and turned back time, but then I don't know how he's gonna stop him from just having a heart attack again.
No, we're gonna take you to the hospital.
But and so it's such a sharp contrast from the way that they handled the death of Pa Kent in Man of Steel, where
Man of Issues.
He could have saved him. He could have. And so it's unreal. His guilt over not having done anything, I guess, is supposed to be more valid because there was something he could have done and he chose not to. But it's sort of it gives it the same kind of problem that the movie version of Harry Potter 6 has compared to the book, where at the end, when Dumbledore dies, spoilers, Dumbledore dies.
You said it wrong. It's Snape. Snape kills Dumbledore.
Snape kills Dumbledore.
Snape kills Dumbledore.
That in the book, they land on the top of the tower. They just come back from the cave by the sea. They've gotten the Horcrux. Dumbledore is close to death anyway, and so they land there. The Snape and the Death Eaters are waiting, and Dumbledore knows Harry is still important. He has things to do. It's okay if I die. And so he puts Harry in a full body bind curse, puts the cloak over him. And so then Harry has to watch not being able to do anything. He watches Dumbledore get killed, but he literally can't do anything. Dumbledore has stopped him from being able to do anything and sacrificed himself. He's taken the responsibility away from Harry. Harry still feels guilty about it, but there's nothing he could have done. And so it keeps the heroism of Harry while also having the not necessarily inevitability, but the Dumbledore has to die. And so, but you can't have, it's better to have no responsibility for it, but still have the guilt and the self-blame that isn't valid. That makes it more dramatic and makes it more powerful. In the movie, they don't do that. Harry just hides under Dumbledore says hide, Harry hides, and he could have done something, but he chooses not to. And it fundamentally changes the character and the story from that point, and it's in a significantly damaging way. And that's what having him not save him from the tornado does, because he does have a choice. He could have saved him. There's no reason he had to die.
Yeah.
And in this, nobody could do anything. He just has a heart attack.
It just happens.
And they set it up earlier when he's changing the tire. When they find him as a kid, he says, be careful of your heart. The doc said, be careful of your heart. And so they plant the seed early, and so it's justified when it happens. He doesn't just happen to have a heart attack so that it can be sad. And so so you get a little bit of sadness that way. But mostly, it's not. Mostly, it's optimistic, it's heroic. Even to the point of the opening before the opening, that sort of history of the Daily Planet kind of thing, where it's it was the responsibility of the Daily Planet to keep the public informed, and it's ooh, old school news responsibility. Things have changed.
Oh Lord!
So
I'm looking at you, Wall Street Journal.
We'll just Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times.
The holy goddamn New York Times.
We're looking at all of you. Which actually that makes it an old-fashioned. It actually even knows it's old-fashioned then, because it sets that in the 30s, so that then by the time Superman is Superman age, then it's in the present time. Yeah. Which actually people complain now about, when you tell a Superman story, he still works at a newspaper, and that makes no sense that he works in a newspaper, because he worked in a newspaper in the original comics so that he could be informed of what was going on, so that he could know where he had to go to save something, because everything comes into the newspaper first. It might not get printed until later, but the newspaper knows right when things happen, because everything comes over the wire.
Well, that was the thing. It's as it said, I work for the newspaper, so I can be near the action without drawing suspicion.
Yeah. And then now,
even if he was like a camera guy, news reporter kind of dude, is like, as long as he's near the action where he can say news, then it gives him an out.
But now, people say now, newspapers are dead. Nobody reads the newspaper. The newspapers are slow. Even TV news is dead. Everybody gets all the news from the internet. And so it makes no sense. It's too old fashioned to have him work for a newspaper. But even in the 70s, TV news had largely taken over from newspapers. There was still a great deal of business done by newspapers, but it was already starting to lose out to TV news. And that had been happening for a few years by this point. So it's already kind of out of date now, or in the late 70s, for him to be at a newspaper rather than at a TV station. And there wasn't 24-hour news yet. That wouldn't happen for a few years, but there was still a great deal of importance in TV news. And largely because of the Kennedy assassination, because people wanted to know what was going on and and they were printing new editions of the newspaper as fast as they could, largely with no different information than there was in the previous issue. But people were still buying them and reading them because they wanted to know what was going on. And so the radio and TV was where people were mostly getting the up-to-the-minute information. And so that's where TV news really starts to become really important compared to newspapers, because newspapers were just too slow. But they just, in the movie, even though it might be a little out of date to have him work at a newspaper, it's part of just the commit. We're just doing the way it is in the comics. We're making a comic book movie. It doesn't have to be like gritty and real and anchored in today. Maybe it takes place in the present time and all the cars look current, but it takes place in Metropolis, not actual New York. There's no, it looks like New York. You can tell it's New York. You have the,
Statue of Liberty,
the World Trade Center towers, the Empire State Building. It's obviously actual New York, which is what Metropolis always was. And just that was the difference. That's always been the difference between the way that DC put their stuff into the real world and the way Marvel did, because Spider-Man is in New York. It's actually New York. The Flatiron Building doesn't actually have a newspaper in it, but it could, and the Flatiron Building is real. So they just decided it's in New York. And so in DC you have Metropolis, which is New York. You have Gotham, which is probably Chicago or Detroit, maybe. Probably Chicago.
I think it's Chicago.
And
because the docks.
And you have what's the city where Supergirl is? I don't remember. But so you have all these made up names for places but they look like real places, and so they just remove it slightly from the actual world. But they just full commit to he's gonna wear the blue suit, he's gonna have the stupid underwear on the outside, and
it's not stupid.
It's not stupid, but everybody thinks it's stupid, and they just have so refused. Now there is an article by on a costume design, I guess maybe it's a blog, I don't know, that I read sometimes, where they talk about that it is stupid because really Superman is wearing underwear anyway.
Yeah.
Especially in the current DC movies, he really is, because the way they establish that is that's the undersuit that you wear inside the fighting armor, and
he's just not wearing.
And he's just not wearing the armor. He's just wearing the suit, and so he really, literally is wearing Krypton underwear. He's just wearing it on the outside.
It's awfully nice of him.
It's awfully elaborate to be something that's supposed to just be under something else. All of that texture and everything, which started in Superman Returns, all of that having tiny little Superman shields as the texture on all of the rest of the suit. But which was such a huge deal. I remember there being just articles about it on the internet when Superman Returns was coming out, or when they first put out the first pictures of what the suit was supposed to look like, and it's all the tiny shields, and some people were like, ooh, look at that, and some people were like, it's terrible, it's supposed to be smooth, especially if it's supposed to be Christopher Reeve Superman. Why does it have so much texture? It never had texture before. But
what year did Spider-Man 3 come out?
Spider-Man 3 is 2005 or 6, something like that. The first one is 2001.
Well, because I'm trying to think. Maybe that's why. Because didn't the suit that Tobey Maguire wore in Spider-Man 3, like, wasn't it like outrageously textured?
It has way more texture than the previous ones.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, like, I wonder if that's why. It's like, well, if Spider-Man can do it, we can.
Well, Superman Returns is 06. Yeah. So they're at about the same time. But just everything was doing it at that time. I'm not really sure. Like, I always blame Superman Returns for it because that was the one that got the most coverage for it. But it may not be the only thing to blame or even the first thing to blame. It's just like everything gets texture when it doesn't have to. I mean, the Abrams Star Trek movies did the same thing. Those uniforms have an awful lot of texture on them where it doesn't really make any sense for them to. And so that whole like mid-late 2000s period it's a texture cannon. And I mean, I like the Superman Returns suit is my favorite of the recent Superman suits because it still looks like the classic suit, but they've muted the colors down a little bit. He still has the stupid underwear. It has the texture, but it's not that bad when you don't look at it too close. But at least it's bright and colorful, and it's the colors like the super. I know it's like it's dumb. He's the American way. Like, why does he care about America except that he grew up in Kansas, and so he's just learned to do it that way. But the colors of Superman are like, except for the yellow, like American. He's literally red and blue, and like his face is the white part, and then you just have the yellow in the accenting. But it's like Superman is the colors of America. He's like the symbol, he's DC's Captain America. Mm-hmm. And so when you mute everything down to make it dark and realistic, and it's like, he's not the colors of Superman anymore. They actually did have in this version of it, the color blue that it ended up being is actually brighter than they meant it to be because they had to it was going to be a darker blue, but they couldn't make it as dark blue as they wanted to because it was too close to the blue screen color. And so then you would just key out him too, and it would not be what you wanted it to be.
Oh, that would be kind of cool though.
It's just Superman's head and hands flying around and the boots, I guess. They do. There's so much of this where they don't go full on to make everything exact. Ma Kent doesn't literally sew the suit out of the like blanket that he came in, which is one of the origin versions of to why the suit doesn't get damaged, even though it should if it's just regular cloth. He does have the red, yellow, and blue blanket that he comes from space in, but it's sort of a foil kind of material, and so it's not what the suit actually looks like. So. But it's still there. It's still the colors. They established the colors.
Yeah.
Which actually, to go back to the opening after the titles, there's so much like production in that too. All of the crystals and everything having the like 3M front projection, like retro-reflective material as the robes, so it looks like it's glowing. And
looking at them hurt my eyes because it does feel like they're glowing. So it's like it feels like there's light puncturing my eyes, even though it's almost like nothing's there. It's so weird. But it does help with their environment. So like, even though it's so bright, like everything is really bright, they do stand out well compared to like all of these structures. Because the structures, if you haven't seen it, the structures are relatively clear / white. And it looks like they're either made of glass or plastic. And that's really, I don't know like what else it would have been made out of, but I would have loved to have had some of the shards of their so-called crystal.
I mean, there's so many. It's such an extensive set. I mean, I don't know how many of them are actually individual. We do see Jor-El pick up a couple of them, and when he's like building the last of the like space pod thing, or actually star ship is what it's credited as.
Literally, because it looks like a shiny,
looks like a star, and it's space. It's not a starship. It's a star ship. Starship. But I mean, it's
even the making of that, like that thing is outrageous.
It is.
And it's just like someone built that. They had the whole thing set up. We can only pray that they were not dumb enough to put the kid in it and actually close it as they suspended it on camera.
They did. I mean, it is the 70s, so who knows?
Exactly.
But like, I mean, that's a super well-behaved baby, even as it is. But because there's long shots where it just has to sit there and be quiet while Marlon Brando reads his cue cards.
Yeah. And when we mean long shots, like there's only like maybe 3 cuts in that total thing, but between just them in the chamber where the starship is, putting the infant into it. Not including, like, because after that point, they cut back and forth between, like, the council room, and then, like, we get, like, one more shot where it's actually being lifted up, and then it's close, so we don't get to see the infant anyways.
But there's that long conversation between Jor-El and his wife, whose name I can't remember, but about they're 2 different, like, he's like, he'll be important, he'll have power, and she's like, he'll be alone, he'll be sad, it'll be terrible, and they're having this like 2-sided conversation where they're just totally talking past each other. They're almost talking over each other some of the time, just with the 2 totally different perspectives of what it's going to be like for him on Earth.
Yeah.
And it's really great. It's because it's not like, oh, we didn't know, we just sent him to Earth. It just happens to be like, yeah, Jor-El knew because he like that's what he does. He was one of the like big lead scientists on Krypton. I mean, they decided not to listen to him because they just didn't want to believe that they weren't as good as weren't as powerful as they thought. Like, the planet won't blow up. You're crazy, Jor-El.
Well, see, I think I'm not sure because between all of the years that Superman's been around, I don't remember every bit of it, but I remember there was one thing where he had a vision that the planet was going to blow up, but he couldn't prove it, and that's what led him to panic. And then that's when they were like, oh, well, you're crazy. And then there was the one where it's like he could prove it, but no one would listen to him.
Yeah. And I think this is that. They don't cover it that much, but I think this is that version. Like,
well, no, I think this is the one where he had the vision, but they don't ever explain that because they all act like there's no proof to it. But in the Man of Issues one, like that's the one that he seemed to have proved.
Yeah,
and they're like,
he has
no,
research.
Yeah, like I hear this is gonna happen. They're like, nah, get out of here, but don't leave the planet. Get out of here.
Yeah, which actually that's something even in this one I want to talk about because
why do you care if he leaves the planet?
Krypton,
I mean, he's not hurting all of these people and acting like some mad cult to fight against you. It's like, hey, if his wife and his infant want to leave the planet because he thinks it's gonna blow up and you don't want to listen to him, why stop him?
Well, I think he has public standing, like people know who he is, and if he leaves, people will wonder why and want to maybe leave too, and like the council doesn't want. I don't know why. I mean, see that's what I want to talk about. Is like Krypton is kind of a dystopia. Yeah. Like they have, it's almost like a 1984 kind of thing. Like they're monitoring the power, and he's using too much power in his quarters. Go and check it out and arrest him. And it's you're not really.
Why would it matter?
They don't. They have the council, and then everything's absolutely decided, and you can't leave because we said, and it's just all like it seems really authoritarian and really not that happy a place. I mean, it really seems like the planet Krypton is not really a friendly place. It's all like it's ice and it's snow and it's desolate and there's nothing outside the city.
It doesn't look like ice and snow. The thing is, it looks like it's just solid crystal.
Yeah,
and because they're so close to the sun. Like they're so close, and everything just looks like it's been bleached out, and it's all crystal, like it's made of like salt or something. And that's probably why all the old people are so grumpy. They got salt in their britches. And so it looks like they've just built themselves into all of this crystal, and that's somehow where their technology and shit comes from. And they have this one dome, and I don't understand what the dome's for, because it looks like everything is in the dome, but the dome opens up.
And it's just the council chamber.
And it's just the council chamber, but it's not even really the council chamber. It's like only a centerpiece of the council chamber, because that's where they, the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
So some of that stuff, like whenever you really think about it, it's like, but why? And so my thing is, if the way the council works is it has to be unanimous, and that means everyone has to agree. then what happens when, like, if he's just like, well, I'm part of the council and I say no, then what are you going to do?
Well, I think they'll just kick him off the council and arrest him and send him to the Phantom Zone, because that's what it seems like when they're in the scene where he's in the quarters with the starship.
And that's a dystopian future.
And they're they're sending the guards. Which they seem to have like some kind of transporter technology or something. It's never really specifically addressed, but they have like those ring things that seem to do a bunch of different things, because they seem to be like a keep you here force field trap kind of thing in the council chamber where they're keeping General Zod. And it's a really cool effect. It's a really simple mechanical thing. It's just the two rings that are mounted that way, and it just spins, but it looks like it's this alternating thing because of the way it tricks your eyes. And so it's a really effective effect in a really low-tech way.
Absolutely.
But they use them several other places. They're just kind of around. It just seems sort of like a Krypton design. They use it a bunch of places. But then it also has, like, when the guard dude transports from here to there, he's standing in the middle of a small one of those. And so I don't really know what those do, but they do seem to have some kind of transporter thing. So it may be that the city is really big. It's all just under the ground.
Yeah.
And there are some windows, some of it faces outward, but like Jor-El has high standing. He's a member of the council, so maybe he gets special
the
quarters.
Penthouse.
Yeah, and so his house
closer to the surface
faces out in the like that big canyon thing.
Yeah, the cliffs.
Which is a great effect shot too, where they do that big zoom into him and his wife standing in there, and so it's them from like some other shot in the model, and it's this great perspective thing. That is something like it's really stupid, the tagline from the poster, which everybody knows, which is "You will believe a man can fly," but the almost all of the effects are really effective.
Oh yeah. Now, granted, some of the flying's a little wonky.
Some of it is.
I mean, like, hey, it still kind of works.
They're doing a bunch of different. I think when he flies, it's fine. The thing that makes it weird is when he flies with Lois, because she doesn't. Like, I know he's holding on to her, and so he's doing the propulsion part of it. But shouldn't she just be being drugged behind him?
Exactly.
Like, she shouldn't be able to hold against the force of the movement, especially when they're going really fast.
Yeah. And
so that's what makes it seem like they're not really going anywhere.
And then, like, whenever he lets go, she just immediately falls.
Yeah.
Like, there's, like, no forward momentum anymore. What I mean is whenever he flies slowly, and he's just kind of, like, putting out, like...
Yeah.
And, like... Stop. I can tell the effects. Like, speed him up a little bit.
Yeah.
Speed him up.
I mean, there are some times when it's really great. Like when he leaves the Fortress of Solitude in the suit the first time, and he flies like towards camera and then over the top of it. And all of that's just why there's a bunch of different ways that they're doing it too. Some of it is just on wires and it's distant. Some of it is they're using special zoom lenses in front of a front projection. And so it's almost doing like a push-pull, kind of like the Jaws kind of shot, where it makes it look like he's flying. He's not moving. He's just hanging from wires, but it looks like he's getting closer. The background is receding. Some of it is on blue screen. Some of it is in the actual sets, just on wires. There's a bunch of different ways that they had to do it, depending on what kind of shot it was. And they were basically inventing all of this. Like, so much of this, nobody had ever really done anything like this before. And even the titles, like that, they had to, the company that did it took the agreement to do it, and like they said, we have this idea, can you do it? And they said yeah, and had no idea how to do it, and they had to figure out how to do it. Like, they knew they didn't know how to do it, but they took the contract anyway, and just did it, and had to figure it out, and almost didn't make it in time. So
I'd like to see that meeting after they say yes, and like all of the people who actually work on putting this stuff together are just panicking, just losing their shit, and they got like these blackboards, and they're like, "How are we gonna do this?"
Yeah. I mean, and there's lots of great miniatures and models, and like, big miniatures.
Yes.
Like the Golden Gate Bridge miniature is like 70 feet long. So you have really like large scale miniature always sounds like a dumb thing to say. It's like saying jumbo popcorn shrimp or something. But it's like it is, you have different scales of miniatures, and sometimes you have big miniatures, and sometimes you have little miniatures, but they're all smaller than the real thing.
Well, it's a miniature, and it's still bigger than you.
It's big. It's really big. So and all of Krypton is a mixture of miniatures and a little bit of matte paintings, all of the exterior stuff, but then also just lots of just big, expensive, amazing sets like the Fortress of Solitude set and the interiors from Krypton. And
I like the outdoor shots when they're at, like in like the cornfields and everything.
Yeah, all of the Kansas stuff.
I like those just for like the openness of it. So it really does feel like that's where you're at. Like, oh, like you were actually in Kansas. Here's all of these fields. Like the football stuff, just being outside really did kind of solidify. Like, oh yeah, like this is a guy, from Smallville.
Yeah,
is it Small or Smalls? Smallville. Okay.
Yeah, because everything in Superman is so simplified.
And then like that run,
it's a small town. What do we call it? Smallville.
Simple, done, move on.
Like when they're all of the it's really no less dumb than all of like Lex's new names for new coast of California.
Otisville.
Even like Smallville is dumber than Otisville.
Yes,
because like you could have an Otisville because that's how most towns are named. They're named after somebody that founded it or a company or something. And so it's like nobody would call anything Smallville. It's ridiculous. Yeah, Otisville it doesn't say Lex in it or Luther in it, so it's not acceptable to him, but it's not an unreasonable name for a town. Yeah, the run, you really there's no good way to do it because we know what people look like when they run, and you can't really cheat it because we understand just physically the shape of humans can't move faster than a certain speed. And if you do it more than that, it doesn't work. I mean, that's what, like, you can do it if you really cheat it and make it really cartoony, or you hide it some way. Like when the Mask runs, it's like a cartoon where it's just like spinning, like it almost like there's wheels or something. It's just spinning and there's dust, and so you don't really like you can cheat it like a Wile E. Coyote kind of thing. But if you actually show the person really moving, it doesn't really work. In one of the episodes of Star Trek Discovery, one of the characters runs real fast, and it looks real dumb. And it's just because there's no way to not do it.
Well, while I agree with you, because it is a bitch,
I mean, it's still an effective scene, but it's just a goofy kind of effect just by default.
It's kind of fun because, he just gets picked on, and then he's like, and then he starts running, and then you get the little girl who sees him, and she's all excited, and then he... Fuck bitches. She's all excited, and he's just running, and he's like, "Oh, can I make it past the front of the train?" And it's like, zoom, and he does, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of funny and silly looking, but it's like, hoorah, he did it.
Yeah. The thing about that scene though is that's Lois as a little girl.
Yep.
And so that makes the relationship between Superman and Lois a little bit icky because he's like 10 years older than her, probably. And so when we actually see them as adults, I guess you're supposed to kind of forget that, but it's I don't think that was necessary to have her establish that early. It's just like she can have the writer's imagination line from the mom, but just like everyone is so dismissive of everything. Like, well,
she's not even really like a creative writer. She writes for a newspaper.
Now she does, but. She
you don't need an imagination to write for a newspaper. You need the truth.
Yeah, well,
or the ability to make up the truth to lead people to believe what you want them to believe because you're making stuff up, which I guess would work, but not for the Daily Bugle
or the Daily Planet,
because we need pictures of Spider-Man.
Well, the Daily Bugle. See, the Daily Planet is informing the public. The Daily Bugle might be a newspaper, but it's really almost a tabloid where he's just like, we'll make it seem like whatever we want it to seem like. I'll make Spider-Man seem like the bad guy. And it's like, but you're a newspaper. So, which actually the closeness to that kind of newspaper editor character that this one gets, even though he's not going full J. Jonah Jameson. He's not far off. Like, he's still doing like the fast talking and the like this and that. I like the little
he's
like
still
he
extreme.
points out people misspell stuff all the time just as he walks by, and
there's no Z and
there's no Z in Brazier.
There's no Z in Brazier.
And then
there's only one P in rapist.
Only one P in rapist. Yeah. But then the scene, it almost is like a we have to get pictures of Spider-Man scene when Superman saves the like 5 different things in a row that one night, and then they're trying to get the story, and he has all the reporters from all of the desks in the office, and he's like, you find out how tall he is, you find out this, what's that, and he's really going through all of it really is like a get pictures of Spider-Man kind of scene.
Does he eat Ben and Jerry's?
Does he have a girlfriend? But it's they take a long time to actually say Superman.
They do.
And that's fine. I mean, really, that's something. He doesn't
say it himself.
He never says it himself.
It's somebody else.
But somebody else actually says it, which is something that they still like. Have they said it in the new DC movies? Has anyone ever, like? I know it's in the title of Dawn of Issues.
Well, is it
but
like
does anyone ever say it?
Like Man of Issues, where Lois is talking to him, and it's like, "What's that S? Oh, it's not an S. It means hope. So what are you, like a Superman?"
Yeah, I guess that's the closest they get. But there's just just say it. Like, sure, it's dumb that his name is Superman, but his name is Batman. That's dumb too. Like, it's all dumb.
I'm Batman.
I'm a friend.
Like, just say it. What? Like, just say it.
That's not the same thing.
Just there's no, like, you can say it, like, we're on, and it's in the title, so you've already committed to the names, and also, like, come on, like, if you can just say, like, the Martha scene is way dumber than just saying Superman. Like,
come on, say it for God's sake.
it's just like, just say it, just come on, just say it.
Just say it.
I know. And so just don't
let my dreams just be dreams.
And so the way she comes up with it is kind of dumb, because she says, "What a Superman," and which is getting
it's the 70s,
dangerously close to him saying "swell," which she just told him was not okay.
He has that effect on people.
Yeah, I guess so.
So, God damn it.
What?
I was about to say charismatic, but that's not the word they used. So confident.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little irresponsible to...
They're pink. Oh, sorry. Did you want me to keep looking?
Oh. Yeah. I mean, they even just the way they get all of that stuff out, like he can't see through lead, and although it's a little irresponsible to tell that to the newspaper.
I know, right? Like, oh, yeah, here's one of my weaknesses. I can't see through lead.
Yeah.
How does he... Lex, okay, I want to break down for a second. And how in the hell does Lex even come up like, hey,
I know he makes some leaps, yeah.
Somehow, if that planet really did explode, which he wasn't there for because it happened after he left, it exploded. There's a chance. Like all of these galaxies away, like just a little shit of it landed on Earth with him. We don't know when. It's gonna glow green because radiation. And it's just like, oh yeah, and it's gonna kill him. It's going to kill him, so we're going to take it, we're going to put it on a chain, and we're going to trick him, and like, haha, don't open that. And he's just going to open it, and then he's going to be, like, he doesn't step away from it, like, come on!
I mean, I feel like that is just part of the conceit that we decide to accept. Like, it's just, it's Superman, he fights for truth and justice, Lex Luthor is evil because he is...
but it's like, Lex Luthor is evil. Okay, that's fine. I can accept that.
And you have to have kryptonite because it's just part of the Superman deal.
And I can accept that, but I like
I know it's all in one scene.
Yes.
They're in the library. He's hatching the plan, and he just comes up with the whole thing. And I guess it's just supposed to be like Lex is a real smart dude. He could figure it out. But it is a big leap.
Like, well, the thing is, like, everything else that he does, at least in some kind of feasible sense, works. Except that there is no proof even
No.
fake
Even
for this to work.
Even he finds a picture of a meteorite in the book that he just rips the page out of. But
okay, we got to go to Kenya now. I killed 2 people to get this rock for you.
Yeah, but how do you know that
a hunch.
particular rock came from Krypton? Like there's lots of space in space. Could have been a piece of something else. How do you know?
See, like with him collecting stuff and have all this weird thing, like if he just seemed to have it as part of his collection, like with all of his crazy stuff, it's like it's a rock from space and it glows green and I like it because I'm insane. All right. Okay. You already have weird stuff. You live underground in New York, anyways. So I'm not questioning that.
Which that's a great set too. The disused old Grand Central Station or whatever it is. Like that's really really nice. Having it all like he's got part of it underwater for the pool, and you have all the archways and the chandeliers and stuff. It is.
It's a great set. It looks nice. It looks livable. Like you really could live in it.
Yeah.
And so props to the set decorator. You did an amazing job.
The production designer, the set, everybody. I mean, everybody.
Oh.
Everybody involved in this did a great job. There's a scene that I thought I remembered that doesn't happen exactly the way that I thought it did, because I thought I remembered the train like wrecking off into like the fissure that forms from the fault, and that's not a real thing that happens.
At least not in this version.
No.
Like I don't remember that, so I can't help you with that.
It's it must be from something else.
But I can tell you one thing: that town got washed away.
Well, I think didn't he only turn time back to after he built the wall? I mean, what? Okay. Once we get to the time travel stuff, everything falls apart. I mean, they anchor it early on. There's you're forbidden to interfere with human history. That we get that super early when he's still flying through space as a baby. And I mean, I guess they know somehow. I mean, there's little bits of stuff in there. Some of which is like really strange and like, wait, what? But there's things like, each galaxy has its own unique laws of time and space and things, and it's like, no. But since
not only are you wrong, shut up.
But they establish it early. We're accepting that the yellow sun and the gravity and the air and whatever makes Superman compared to the rest. So whatever, we're accepting a lot as it is. But and so they anchor it early, like they do the heart attack, and so I guess it's supposed to be okay. But time is not related to the rotation of the Earth. No. So
we'll see. Even on that, whenever he's talking about what's going to give Superman his powers, he talks about you powered like we were powered by the red sun.
Yeah.
All right. No, it's the yellow sun.
No. I mean,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like that's why none of them on Krypton had these abilities, because it was a red sun. You need a yellow sun, because of the type of radiation that radiates off of it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, because you will be bathed in the radiation of the yellow sun, you will have these powers. The gravity is not as strong as here, so that'll help. All this other kind of shit. That's fine. That's fine. And even if we were to accept that if you flew around the Earth fast enough to take that entire ball of mass and rotate it the other direction.
Well, which what he really just did is just kill everyone.
Everyone's dead.
I mean, that's what one of people like to say, like when Jesus is on the cross, like time stopped. Like the sun stopped and it just stayed there for hours.
The world burned.
Well, no, not burned.
Everything.
Well, no,
flooded.
what happened? Well, yeah, the flooding and like everything gets blown away by the atmosphere, because the problem is at that time they thought that the sun went around the Earth, not the Earth went around the sun, and that the Earth rotates. They didn't know that, and so what happens then is if the Earth comes to a stop, the atmosphere doesn't, and so everything just the ocean still moves because it's moving because of the motion and the inertia and everything, and so then you just get like super high speed winds relative to
water,
to the station.
We have to think about the moon's gravitational
everything just
pull
moves.
Where it's at.
Yeah, everything just keeps moving around the Earth and washes and blows everybody away. And that would happen.
Geostorm.
That would happen if Superman just because it comes sort of to a stop and then starts to spin the other way. And so, I mean, the whole, however it works makes no sense at all.
We're just going to pretend that it does.
We're just going to pretend it, yeah.
We're going to pretend
if
that
we pretend
it does.
that it works. I mean, I guess is it like he's moved. What is he? Is it some kind of like he moves faster than light or something? So there's a relativity thing going on. I don't even know.
Stop.
I mean, they never do it again.
No.
And I think it kind of, I mean, they have to, I guess they want to, what Lex says has to be true. You can't save both.
Yeah.
You have to decide. And he chooses New Jersey over California. And so he doesn't quite have time to save everything. Although he does actually save everyone except Lois.
Yeah.
So then it's just Lois that he has to sacrifice, which he can't deal with. And so then he has to take it back.
He sacrifices California.
Well, no, he doesn't, because he turns it back. I think he does everything else. He just gets to Lois in time. Because the gas station still exploded. That still happened. That happens about the same time. So I think he saved that town. He didn't. Which
I'm going to take the stance that he didn't.
Still, just isn't that worse though?
it is worse, but at the same time, like,
I mean, that
like
gets
how
into
how
like,
kind of lazy is it of the filmmaking to be like, oh yeah, we showed you this, but then we showed you him undoing it, so we're not going to show it to you again to make sure that you know that he is Superman saving everybody. And that he does know where Lois is. Like, how fast did she die, really? Like, was she crushed to death because she
Well, it takes place over several minutes. She's sinking into the ground. We keep cutting back to her while he's doing other things. Dirt's pouring in. She's falling into the crevice.
Well, it's not like she gets buried.
Hello? No, she doesn't really get buried. It doesn't look like she has enough time to suffocate or anything. But, I don't... Yeah, I'm not really sure what she dies of.
Yeah, and now personally, I do kind of have a hard time wanting to sympathize with her dying because it was so easy to just get out of the car. It's not like she turned back and it's sinking and like the ground sinking and she screams and then in mid-scream the car sinks. Like the car's still hanging out. It sinks relatively slowly. Like by time that the bottom starts sinking, she can still get out. Like we can see the door above ground. It's just at more of an angle.
Yeah.
So she could just get out of the fucking car.
I mean,
How easy would that have been?
We don't actually know. Maybe because there is a time travel situation going on. Maybe until time catches up with itself, there's actually two Supermans. Like he's over there saving the town, and because he already did it in the other time, and so then while that's going on, then instead he's flying over here to save Lois. They don't show us that, but I mean, because it basically is time travel. That's what happens. He turns back time, he sets it going again the right direction. So there's some kind of time travel rules happening. They just don't spend any time defining it. It is, I think, the weakest part of the movie. Everything up until then is fine. Because
I don't remember all of the original movies, for a good reason.
You don't have to.
All right, so...
basically what happens in 2 is General Zod shows up and starts trying to take over the Earth, and Superman has to fight him, but he gives up his powers like a third of the way through the movie so that he can be human with Lois, and then he has to get them back, and so there's a whole thing. It's really like what happens in Man of Issues. The second half of Man of Issues is Superman 2.
And so... My question is, does he find in the second one, does he get his laser vision and his frost breath?
He uses them, yeah.
I was like, because you know, like how much shit he could have solved just by doing that in this one.
I know they don't actually, yeah, they don't establish all of the powers.
I mean, like when he's chasing the first missile, he could have just like laser beamed it.
He could have.
And then like just full busted back to California.
Yeah.
Instead of having to fly into space. And then he could have laser blasted the other one too. And then if he couldn't quite make that one, remember, that's a nuke. That's a nuke.
It is a nuke, yeah.
So we're going to have fallout. So that whole area is fucked. Okay.
Yeah.
And so like at least when he's like in the fault and he's flying through trying to lift the rock back up to hold, makes any sense. At least frost breath.
That makes about as much sense as the time travel does, because he's like, they cut to him like he's lifting a rock, but then the outside of it is like various pieces of it are getting filled in, and I don't know how that works. I mean, really, the time travel thing busts everything that comes before it, because if he can fly that fast, he should have been able to fly fast enough to catch both missiles and have plenty of time left.
Yeah.
He just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
And there's not some kind of like, if he flies too fast, it'll like damage the Earth or something, you know, like the Human Torch might set the atmosphere on fire kind of like worry. Like there's nothing like that. So it doesn't make sense that he can't fly fast enough to catch both of them, but then he can fly fast enough to change the Earth's rotation. So,
and mind you, we're talking about like a full, not on ground, but like upper atmosphere flying around the Earth multiple times per second
in space or something.
Like that's ridiculously fast. So like, yes. The planet died.
It kind of, yeah.
He attempted time travel and the Earth died. And so what we saw afterwards was just his delusional imagination filling in after he realized that he killed everybody. And they didn't want to make it all sad and gloomy, so they gave us this. And then after they were like, okay, well, here's going to be the rest of it, the studio was just like, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because they show all of that, like the reverse shots of everything getting destroyed, which actually that's an amazing model too. The Hoover Dam is a great large scale model.
I would say the weakest part of any of the models is whenever they have that high shot of the town, and you can tell the town itself is a model, and it's not like a really well constructed model, but like the environment, the way the rocks are set up, because whenever you see him pushing rocks off, like the model really does look like that.
Yeah.
So it matches well, but then you see the town, and like the town's kind of weak.
Yeah. Well, and the hardest thing is the water, because water doesn't miniaturize.
No.
Whenever you have water in a miniature setting, usually you use sand, because you can make it look like water if you shoot it at the right speed. It flows about the same way, depending on the size of the miniature that you're using it. And you can have much smaller grains of sand than you can have beads of water, because water will only droplet to a certain size. And if the miniature is small, then you have these giant pieces of water. And you can cheat a little bit by shooting it at high frame rate, having it be slow motion. It makes it look like it's more water. But then if it touches something else physical, the water looks too big for the thing it's in, and and it makes it look like a miniature.
Yeah.
And so water is tough.
That's I love Godzilla. Kill me. Sue me.
We know.
Okay. So here's the deal. When it comes to using water for any of the Godzilla movies, they have a outrageously large pool. Like the pool is gigantic.
Well, and also, I mean, Godzilla is not supposed to be as big compared to the other things. It's easier because. And also, he is a larger thing.
Yes. The
Suitman technology is big enough that the water looks okay.
Well, see, what they do is, like, they have, it's a huge pool, and they have, like, these add-ons that they put on it. So if they need to build a bay for him to come onto, then, like, they have, like, the huge pool, which is, the ocean. And then there's that. And then if they have to make a lake, like Godzilla versus Monster Zero.
Yeah.
That's a different structure that they built that was indoor. But anything else, if it's either been ocean, port, anything that I guess you'd say would be salt water, it is just a gigantic pool. They just put stuff on and they shoot all of that outside.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool, because then you have all of the buildings / whatever they impose onto the film whenever they have, like, here's your water set, your water touching ground set that he's interacting with, compared to what we actually have that's live film, because we actually have roads, cliff, anything like this, which is an actual part because we're in this region.
Well, and I think some of that they do some really great forced perspective stuff, so that it's actually smaller scale things, but it's closer to the camera or farther away from the camera, and so it's not the miniature is this actual size and the water is touching it or he's touching it. So you have a mix of scales, which also helps to trick your eye into not being able to tell what size anything is, and you just believe that it's the size it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and like those are great miniatures matched with water techniques. That's real water used really well. But, because they're not this small, that water.
Yeah. Well, and I think the town is like a pretty small model, or it's like the buildings or the houses and things are like like model train kind of scale.
Yeah.
And so they're too small relative to the water. So you have a big piece of water come up and hit a house, and it's just like, it looks small. It looks fake. They do a really good mix of real city stuff, actually, in New York, big plate shots and things. Within some of it is models, and you have cars that are actual model cars that are driving around through city streets. And so there's a mix of all kinds of stuff all over the place. Because actually, any of the stuff that's New York, all of that is like New York unit, second unit stuff that shot all the effects plates, because most of it was made at Pinewood in England. So because they had, except for Elstree, which was occupied with Star Wars, had the biggest sound stages at the time. That's where all of the James Bond movies were made at Pinewood. And so they have so many large scale sets that have to be built. They needed the big stages, and to be able to take over like a whole lot of stages.
Oh yeah.
So they basically they took over Pinewood while Star Wars was taking over Elstree, and so they were the two big movies that were basically occupying everything. And they did actually, some of this was actually even shot on the what's now called the 007 stage at Pinewood. But there's, I think they actually, maybe they did use some of the real Grand Central Station too for some of that. But there, we should say also, I probably should have said this at the beginning, that what we watched is the longer version of it, the sort of reconstructed version that's the midpoint between the original theatrical release, which was cut down from the original cut of it. And so there's scenes that are missing in the theatrical release of it, like he goes to the Fortress of Solitude and he talks to Jor-El about having to keep the secret identity. Like, that scene was cut out of the theatrical release, and there's several other scenes too, and a lot of it is story important stuff, and so this is the better version of it. There is an even longer TV cut version that's almost 3 hours long that doesn't actually exist in any release form. People have variously reconstructed it from this longer version and some of the deleted scenes, but some of it is not actually available. And I think it only showed 2 times on actual TV, and so and it's before there were really VCRs, so there's not really. I think there are some surviving recorded from TV copies of it, but they're recorded from TV, and so they're not very good quality, and they're 40 years old now. There are a lot of people, though, that remember that version as the version. That's the version they saw. They might have been a little young to have seen it in the theater, or they saw the TV version and they recorded and they watched that one a bunch of times. And so that's the memory they have of it, not even this longer version, and especially not the theatrical version. And so that's the version that we watched, the 151-minute version, which is about 8 minutes longer than the theatrical cut. And so it's the preferred version, but it doesn't make that much of a difference. You can kind of watch either one, but it scenes like the secret identity scene are necessary kind of for some of the other things to work as well as they do, because you need to understand why. I mean, even that, just the amount that they commit to he has the glasses and he parts his hair on the other side and nobody notices. Which, and they although they're not afraid to play with what you expect either, because there's that great moment when he's going to be Superman in public for the first time, and there's a shot of a phone booth, and he's like, and it's close to frame, and he looks over at it, and then the camera pans down, and you realize it's one of the ones that's only, it just kind of has a surround. It's not a full booth you can go inside. Yeah. And he kind of looks at it and takes a beat, and then like goes and does it in a revolving door. And so it's this great like, oh, he's gonna change in the phone booth. No, he's not. Like, we know what you expect.
Well, see, I think some of the humor in this movie keeps it upbeat constantly. So even when bad things are happening, there's always going to be like some cut in between that's going to be like, yeah, this is great. And so like one of them is the to get started. I know it's not meant to be funny, but when Lois is going to go and meet Air Force One, and I'm thinking, what kind of clearance do you need to meet the president in 78? Because like nowadays, it's going to be like some extreme clearance, and you're going to be like locked down because like nobody can get close to the president, kind of thing. But like back then, it's just like, oh, we got Lois Lane, and she's like on the helicopter, did the pad on the building top, and the president, Air Force One. Like, wow, this is really fast. I mean, there was, out of nowhere.
Actually, at this time, I mean, you always have, like, you have to have, like, clearance and stuff to be, but there are reporters in the press pool that follow the president around, that ride Air Force One everywhere he goes and everything. But actually, at this time, there had been, because it was just in, like, 76 or in 77, I think, or 70, maybe 75 and 76, when there had been was it Ford, I guess, that had been, is Ford or, Carter was later. I think it was Ford that was shot at like two separate times.
Yeah.
And there's all he gives all these speeches about like he will not become a hostage in the Oval Office, or a prisoner of the Oval Office. Like he's like, yeah, you're shooting at me, but I'm still going to travel around. I'm still going to be the president. I'm not just going to hide. And so there had been some attempts on the president, and so there was more security than there had been, because there had been some relaxing of the increased security that happened as a result of the Kennedy assassination, but that had been a decade before, and so things had gotten a little bit more relaxed than they had been, but then they weren't again by this point, because people were shooting at the president again. That's actually something else that it's, even though the names are changed, it's still America, and so you still have the president, but they don't say, like, she says, I'm going to meet, I have to go to meet Air Force One to meet who. She doesn't say the name. They don't even make up a fake name for the president. They just don't say. It's just like, who the president is. And so they just avoid anchoring it to reality any more than they have to. And so it's not, I mean, and we never see the president at all. We see Air Force One, we see the pilots. It does seem maybe like it's going to be a bit of a problem when he just sets that boat that the
into the middle of the road,
escaping on into the middle of the road. Like, now what? Now they got to move that, or you have to come back and do it, and you could have just not left it there. Kind of inconvenienced everybody.
The people almost get away, and they're on the boat, and he takes his time, and he's just standing there, and they whack him one, and you hear the and I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But see, with that, you pick up the boat, and you set it in the middle of the road. Why? That's come on, man. Now the pilots, like, that was pretty good. Like, don't look, don't ask, just fly. Mm-hmm. And then, like, of course, they tell him that, and then both of them are just like, let's stare out this window, because what is that? Did we get our engine back? No.
Yeah. Which actually they have. They have two engines on each side.
Mm-hmm.
You can fly one of those with two engines down.
Yes.
So the losing of the one engine is not going to.
But the general populace do not know that.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that, because I feel like there was advertising in at the time about the safety of the planes. He gets in a little, like, still the safest way to fly kind of thing. Even though he's talking about him flying and not flying in planes, but this is just like a tiny thing, but the like the Girl Scouts or whoever it is that are like touring the Hollywood sign,
mm-hmm.
When the earthquake starts. Like there are shots of them just like run, like everything's breaking apart and they're running and they're panicking, and then the last shot you see them in, they're just like walking along, and like the sign is still falling behind them, and they're just kind of strolling along like everything is normal while everything, and it's totally doesn't fit at all with the previous shot, and it's just like, ooh, they stop panicking real fast.
Yes.
And
ladies, can you pretend like you're still panicking the whole time?
It's actually still time to panic. Like the earthquake is still going on.
Still happening.
We should talk a little bit about Ned Beatty's character as Otis, because
he's wonderfully stupid.
He's wonderfully stupid, yes.
Wonderfully stupid.
And it's okay because everyone else knows that he's stupid.
He even knows he's stupid.
Yeah, he even knows he's stupid. So it's not like he's stupid at the expense of the realism. Like everybody knows what's going on.
Everybody knows.
And so it's perfectly all right.
It helps the movie because it causes positive interactions, maybe not with him, but with him. So whenever he does something, everybody knows he's stupid, and for some reason, Lex Luthor only keeps him around to make him feel smarter.
Yeah, I guess so. It's something like that. That he does. I mean, he does a lot of great physical comedy too. Like he's like fighting with the lamp as he knocks it over, and it's just.
I prefer the thing with that he was on in the library.
Oh yeah, with the ladder, yeah. Where he just takes it and just leaves Lex just like hanging off of the shelves for a moment.
Like that hand grip.
I think he's standing on one of the lower shelf also for at least part of it. I mean we should say like everybody in this is really acting except for Marlon Brando, because he just wasn't even having it. Like he stipulated he had to have all of his scenes shot in 12 days or less, and he would not memorize his lines. So he's literally I mentioned the cue cards earlier, but he is literally reading from cue cards every time he speaks because he just refused to put any effort into it at all.
We only wanted you for your name.
And that is most of it, yes. Yeah. Because Christopher Reeve wasn't really, I mean, Gene Hackman was a big deal already, but they felt like they needed, the character of Jor-El needed to be, even though you could have mostly unknown other people, especially as Superman, because there were a bunch of other people that they considered to be Superman, even people like Burt Reynolds and various people. But they, but you kind of need him to be sort of not a person already, where you just sort of need it to be like how, like, it's really comparable to Star Wars, where like you want mostly people you don't know who they are so that it maintains the illusion of it, but then you need somebody as the character with all of the importance and gravity and the important things to say, to be someone who you know as a big, meaningful, heavy actor. And so you need Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan, or you need Marlon Brando as Jor-El, so that you have somebody that has gravity and that people will listen to saying these supposedly important things that are actually kind of ridiculous, but it feels real and heavy and important when they say it, because you're used to them saying heavy, important things.
You must not interfere with human history.
Yeah.
It is forbidden.
It is forbidden.
You're not my real dad. Okay, well, maybe you are, but try and stop me.
Yeah.
Pop's pimple.
Which actually, I guess there's some kind of...
I want to know why he doesn't have any social awkwardness, even though he's been like gone from civilization for 12 years.
Oh, he does have fake social awkwardness that he plays when he's being Clark, which a lot of that is really great too. Like he has this gesture where he pushes the glasses up his nose, and he's so delightfully awkward in just the right amount, where
and then when no one's looking, it's like sly smile, like I got them all fooled. Drops the bullet.
I mean, and some of it is the directing too, like that the and actually the editing too, where he like the scene with the elevators, where he's like trying to get an elevator and they're like, this one's going up, this one's full, this one, you know, and he wants to go down. And then there's a long moment at the end of it where there's no one else in the scene anymore. There aren't any more elevators. He doesn't do anything. He just kind of stands there and like looks at his watch or something, or moves kind of a little bit awkwardly, and he's just alone. Like nothing else is even going on, but it makes the button out of the end of the scene when nobody even has to do anything. He just has to stand there continuing to be awkward for a moment too long. And that's what makes the comedy of the scene really land. And it's not, and so there's a lot of that, but a lot of it is just really great acting by him too, like running over like he's trying to shake people's hands through revolving doors, and he's shifting his hat from one hand to the other and like almost getting it knocked out of his hands because the room is crowded. And there's just some really great just physical awkwardness that he's able to sell. And the scene with the mugger is really great too. Like you mentioned that he catches the bullet and then kind of smiles to himself at the end of it. But the whole scene is really great. So this was kind of a risk of a movie. It was big and expensive. No one had ever made a big superhero movie before, and Star Wars would come out before it, but they were in production concurrently, so no one really knew. And it was a risk to spend $55 million on this big, expensive 2-part movie and not have any idea whether it would work or not. And it turns out that it did work. It made about $300 million, which was not as big as Star Wars had been, but it was still a real big deal and unusually large for a movie at that time. And it probably is, like, there are a bunch of these, and we'll cover these as we go through, because there are going to be several of these moments. But if this had not worked, there probably would not have been comic book movies in the way that they were, at least for a long time after. People would have been afraid to try again. And
well, like I'm seeing like there would be no Tim Burton Batman.
Probably,
So,
well,
like,
not at that time. I mean,
yeah.
that's another moment. We'll talk about that when we cover that one, or we'll talk about it more. But by the time you get to that, you had kind of had the superhero movies be sort of destroyed by themselves, because you had the second part of this didn't work the way it should have, because Richard Lester took what they had already made and decided he wanted to make it way more comedic than was actually possible with the material that they had, and so it ends up being not really funny, but also just not very. It's a mess of a movie. And then 3 and 4 get progressively worse and kind of killed the series. And so by the time you get to the third one, you're in like the mid 80s, or the fourth one, you're in the mid 80s, and so then it's not that long before, and so we almost didn't get Tim Burton Batman anyway. And it's also the reason why there's the reset to sort of the taking it a little more seriously. You know, now when you tell people that 89 Batman is like dark and serious, they don't really see it because it doesn't seem that way compared to Nolan or Snyder or whatever. But
Exactly.
But it was, especially for the time, and especially for Batman, because even though we'd had Superman, and this one is a good mix of keeping it sort of serious and realistic while also being a little bit goofy without being really campy. Batman was Adam West.
Yeah.
And,
I don't know if you can get campier than that.
You can't. It was ridiculous.
It's Adam West.
I mean, it was, people will criticize 60s Batman for being campy and ridiculous as if they didn't know what they were doing, and it's just a relic from an earlier time. That's not what happened. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were making that show very deliberately to be exactly the way it was.
Like, there's been so many Batman comic books that it's just like I feel like there's a series of people who read only a particular line of the Batman comic books, and then they stopped. And when they stopped, they only have the knowledge of from like those few comic books. Like, they didn't branch out. They didn't get what's before. They didn't bother reading what's after. And there's just so many different weird Batman lines. It's like, there's a Batman where like Bruce Wayne is dead and it's some other dude, and there's all this other kind of stuff, and it's still Batman, and you're like, what is this? But it's like, oh no, technically it's still Batman because the people who made Batman made this, and it's Batman. You know, it's all this kind of crazy shit. And so
well, I mean, Superman was the same way as well. But I mean, what 60s Batman
there's campy Batman, there's campy Superman, there's serious Batman, there's serious Superman.
That's what the Silver Age was.
Yeah.
The comic books were like that. You know, Batman's fighting aliens and ridiculous things are happening, and all of the the wham and pow and stuff that's in the comic books of that time. A lot of which is the result of the comics code, where you weren't able to actually show anybody getting punched. You couldn't show actual crime in any positive kind of way. It was a result of creatively working around the censorship restrictions, but which Superman didn't really have to deal with quite as much. But you had a movement in comic books. You know, once Frank Miller comes in and starts doing, Year One and all of these kinds of things in the 80s, that's where you get the version of Batman that eventually becomes 89 Batman. And there had been some seriousness in the Superman comics by that time also, or more seriousness, because everything kind of went two ways in the 80s in comics. They either were entirely new creations, sometimes, from like whole cloth. X-Men sort of became a thing that hadn't really existed before, and so there's a very 80s-ness about it inherently. And you had Ninja Turtles was happening, and then you had additions to the comics that were coming in that were new characters. You get is Harley Quinn 90s, not 80s? It might be later, I can't remember. But so you had started to get more seriousness anyway, more grittiness, and so you sort of were moving that way. And so the Superman movies by that point were a little bit of a relic from an earlier time, although they had gone much more goofy than they had started out being.
Mm-hmm.
And Batman hadn't been on TV for a long time. That was what people thought of. But so that's a reset point. And this happens a lot in long running series of things. The James Bond movies have the same thing, where like they start out basically serious, and by the time you get to the last couple of Connery ones, they get a little goofy, and so then they reset and get serious in the first Roger Moore one, and then they get progressively goofier until you get to Moonraker, and then that's way on the outside of over the topness, and then they go even further past that by the time they get rid of Roger Moore. A View to a Kill is just bananas. And so then they reset again, and Timothy Dalton comes out, and he's serious, and it's dark and violent, and then he has two of those, and then Brosnan is basically serious, and then he gets progressively goofier until Die Another Day is way ridiculous, and then Casino Royale comes out and comes back and is serious again. So they have these reset points where they start out serious, and then they get goofy, and then they have to get serious again. And I think superhero movies have kind of had that too, although I think now we seem to be in a reverse period of that, where now everything has been getting progressively darker, and we're going to have a reset to not as dark anymore. Because DC is like, it's dark, it's serious, we have angst, and Marvel has been like, yeah, it's pretty fun, and then now it's gotten, even they have started to get a little bit darker. And so either they're going to have to pull out of that, or somebody else is going to have to make something that's less goofy. And so we're going to have to, sometimes you have like cinema wide resets, like, what Star Wars was, and what we're going to have something pretty soon for, where everything is dark and serious and sad now. And somebody's going to have to make something that's just some fun. I mean, there's things here and there. Rampage is just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
and and it was a great amount of fun.
George has a very sick sense of humor.
It's not trying to be anything but fun, and it does a very good job of being nothing but a lot of fun. And so you have moments here or there, but people didn't seem to really like it that much, because maybe it's just a little too early for people to have a lot of fun. Like how Tomorrowland was a little early for people to take seriously. But so we may be coming upon a reset point back to slightly less serious, and so we've had to go the other way.
Well, I'll give Marvel some credit, because it feels like they're trying to build up to something that's supposed to be dark and serious, and they keep using the whole atmosphere from Guardians of the Galaxy to like, oh, we include this stuff because it feels more lighthearted. There seems to be more like let's have fun and like.
Well, they were doing that.
Here's some inside jokes, but now
now the Guardians are in the main universe,
and like some
everything
serious
is
stuff's
serious.
Kind of happening. We gotta finish this little story arc. I'm more worried about how DC is going to do this.
Well, DC is just a disaster. They don't even know how they're going to handle it yet, because the universe kind of fell apart.
DC disaster currently.
Yeah, disaster currently. Who knows what's going to happen?
Because I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I don't want them to use Flash, like this current very socially awkward Flash. I don't want them to rely on him solely as like, he's our funny character to provide lightheartedness during scenes of intense emotion. I don't want that to happen, because that's going to be a saturated kind of thing. It's going to bring his character down. It's going to make scenes not as necessary, because it's like, oh, well, we were serious, but then you had this shit in here, which was not necessary because, come on, sloppy writing, guys. Like, make something a little lighter, and then like, oh, well, bad guy is serious, saving the day is serious, but when we're not actively doing that, why not have some kicks?
This is not exactly a normal episode. We didn't do the like cast list and synopsis and everything at the beginning, but we still watched a movie and we still have to give some kind of opinion on it. And so, DC Comics may be a disaster currently, but was it back then as well? How do we feel about stars?
I don't know. I'm gonna give this one 4 stars. I would give it 5, but it's
the time travel.
It's that final little bit, the last act. Like the that's what bothers me.
Yeah.
The rest of it I can kind of stand. I don't like the kryptonite bit. I think that's some bullshit. But I'll let it slide. The time travel part, like after that, like from then past that, that's where my concern is. Outside of that, everything else I think is really good.
Yeah, I think so. I think it it keeps it from being perfect, but I mean, for what it was able to manage at all, is that it was even able to be that good is kind of amazing. But yeah, I think 4 is what I was leaning to anyway. Like, it's just, if it wasn't for because even the rest of that sequence, even the rest of the disaster, it's just once you have the flying fast enough to spin the earth the other way and turn back time, it kind of negates the rest of the tension of the earlier part and takes away the like sacrifice of it in a cheating kind of way, because there's not the Green Goblin talks about the sadistic choice in the first Spider-Man movie, and so by that point they're sort of commenting on how common a thing it's been, because even by then, like, we've had it in a couple of, at least one, probably 2 of the Batman movies even, and so they know they're playing in a trope by that point, and they're letting you know they know.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point it wasn't that much of a thing really, but it's still supposed to be the choice. He gives him the choice. You can't do both. And so to then say, well, actually he could have, but for some reason he didn't, but we don't get that reason, is kind of busts everything, and it's a shame. But it's, the rest of it is so good before that. And it's, I mean, even though it's bogus, like just the having everything run in reverse is an effective effect. Even it's just the reasons for it happening, or that it happens at all, is the problem. But yeah, it's the reason, or at least the reason we ended up having. It might, could have been something else, but it's the reason we ended up having superhero and comic book movies still today, and it wouldn't have been had it not at least mostly worked. So I guess the last question though is, did you believe a man can fly? It's kind of a dumb question even as it is.
All I'm thinking about is like Godzilla playing basketball with like Shaq. Like, can you believe a man can fly? I'll believe it when I see Godzilla play basketball with Shaq, and then you just pull out the fucking comic book of it and like, well, I guess a man can.
I guess. And that's all we have to say about this entry in Before There Were Universes. I have no idea what the next one will be yet, because this was the beginning. We had to start here, but we're not going to go through like time and in like chronological order or anything. So we'll kind of bounce around. We might do a Batman movie, or a Blade movie, or a Kingsman movie, or a Fantastic Four. We'll bounce around. Maybe Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Yeah. I mean, at some point we've got to watch that alternate version of 3, so we'll get around to those. So.
What did Goblin say? Like, what was the exact words when he's got like the girl and he's got the people, and he's like, you gotta save blah blah, or you save the girl. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't remember what he called the people.
I don't remember either. But I mean, that's the sadistic choice scene where he actually
He-Man
says
and the Masters of the Universe.
No, not based on a comic book. There were comic books, but not based on a comic. Red Sonja, that's another one.
Hey, I like Red Sonja. Witchblade.
Witchblade. Yeah. Is there a Witchblade movie though? So just
no, it's just a TV show.
Yeah, it's just a show.
A TV show and an anime.
Anime.
The Darkness, which is a comic book and some video games. Hey, those are the ones I grew up with, okay? Like, I had to go out and find Superman and Batman and all this other kind of shit. Like Dark Horse, like that series, Spawn. Like, that was what was on the rack when I went to the bookstore, because we didn't have like I lived out in the middle of nowhere, okay? So whatever. And that's what they had, and that's what I read.
I mean, even The Mask is based on comic books. I mean, very, very lightly, but it was a comic book first, so.
Kick-ass.
Yeah. There's actually one. There was one that I can't remember what it was now. But yeah, there's lots of things to choose from.
So is this going to be like stuff that was a comic book that's a movie that's a kind of on its own thing, or is this just movies that have universes now but back then didn't?
Well, no, I mean, it has to be a movie that was made without a universe in mind, or isn't an entry in a universe. Sequels, like, you can have sequels and still not have a universe. I mean, the thing that defines a universe, like what's happening with Marvel and DC, is that you can have single character movies that can cross over as the same actors and characters into each other's movies, which is what like the Supergirl thing
I know like how to build a universe.
Like,
I'm talking
that's
about
what a universe is.
Like,
so
where does our criteria end though?
Well, that's what I said. It's kind of mushy and not quite defined. Like we talked about at the beginning. But it's it has to have been a comic book first. Okay, so not like there were comic books. It's a comic book first, which is why Red Sonja counts, but Conan doesn't, because Conan is based on novels, but Red Sonja was created as a comic book based on the comic books that were based on the Conan novels, but the character doesn't exist in the Howard books. So her initial appearance is in comic book form. So that's why that counts. So it has to come from comic books, be not part of the franchise universe kind of thing, and have been a movie, like a real movie.
Yeah.
So, we're not going to do the like Incredible Hulk TV movies because those are based on the Lou Ferrigno show, not on the comics, and they were TV movies, not theatrical movies. We might do the Roger Corman Captain America.
Hey, I like that one.
Technically, that never actually came out, but
I remember renting it.
But it does. Yeah, it you can get it. It exists, but it technically never came out as a movie. But I've never seen it, so
I remember watching it as a kid and liking it. I'll probably watch it now and like want to die.
Yeah, probably.
Now, Red Sonja. I watched that a couple years ago, and I remember enjoying it because it is incredibly campy, but in a wonderful way.
Yeah. Yeah. Much to be chosen from. I think we'll probably kind of limit, sequels, like sequel entries. Like we'll do like 89 Batman, and I guess we could do the others or one of the others or something at some point, but generally those will end up being covered as franchise collections where we'll do all of them, and the like big blowout before the reuniverses will be like single ones. So we'll do, although we might eventually get it through all three Blade movies. I don't know. We'll see.
At least Blade 2.
Blade, yeah.
Decisions were made.
Yeah.
All right, so